The left has to do the opposite of what President Trump says. So he says, don't take Tylenol. Now you've got people dying and overdosing on Tylenol. President Trump says he's going after George Soros, and we're now learning that witches were hired to curse Charlie Kirk. To go through this and other big stories, I have my special guest, Eric Eggers. Eric, thank you for joining me again.
Stephen, it's always a pleasure to be here. I look forward to what I'm sure will be a very different and interesting conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I like to bring the craziest news that isn't getting the big story attention that it should. I want to get your thoughts on this. We know that if President Trump says something, Democrats just immediately have to do the opposite, right? Like killing people is bad, they go out and kill. Criminals are bad, they should be in jail. They try to pass bills for criminals. Illegals are bad, they try to save them. Protecting the border is bad, they try to let people in the country. Well, now RFK Jr., Dr. Oz, President Trump, they make this announcement that this is just one of many things that they're going to be revealing. But a major first step is that acetaminophen, the main ingredient in Tylenol, could be one of the reasons it's disrupting the growth of the brain in children and leading to autism. What are your thoughts on that? And then I've got a story that just absolutely shocked me about somebody rebelling against Trump that may actually die now.
So I didn't think this show could get any more interesting after you said witches, but yet here we are. And so what I think about the announcement is I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical expert. I did see that Tylenol sent out a tweet from 2017 saying, hey, we don't actually recommend people take our products while pregnant. But Stephen, what we do here at the Government Accountability Institute and what I do on my podcast is we try to look at like the money behind things and why do status quos that seem less than ideal? How come they persist as status quos? How come they don't change? And one of the things we've talked about is the stranglehold that Big Pharma has over the media specifically, and therefore the conversations we have about how many drugs we are taking. Remember, Stephen, and you know this because you're a smart guy and you tell the truth to your audience, so your audience may not be surprised to hear this, but the United States is one of only 2 countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise on television, right? And so, the other one being New Zealand, which explains all the hobbits. So the fact that we're even we have somebody who's in charge of health in this country as RFK Jr. is, and he's standing up and he's saying a less positive thing about a drug. And he's saying, look, there may be a side effect that this drug's having on you that they're not telling you about. I welcome that level of disclosure. Now, Tylenol has the right to fight for their reputation. They can file lawsuits. They can do whatever. But I think having a conversation, if it's based on fact and based on science, I welcome that conversation. And quite honestly, I think the right side has earned the right to say things and be believed because, as you know, dude, we've been lied to by the left on scientific and medical things since COVID started. So I'm less inclined to take the side of science's side of it. And I welcome just the idea that, hey, maybe there is a piece of this that we're not considering. Let's see what they have to say.
Yeah, we're going to look at what Tylenol actually has to say and why did they do a spinoff a couple years ago in anticipation of a lawsuit maybe? That's exactly what Johnson & Johnson did with the baby powder when it turned out it was giving all these women cancer at a rapid rate. But let me just show you and the audience this. So this is the executive director of American Frontline Nurses. She got a frantic phone call at 4 a.m. from a husband whose wife is now dying of liver failure. She's on a ventilator in ICU. And what did she do? She took a massive dose of Tylenol in order to stick it to Donald Trump. Let me go ahead and we'll watch this together.
So it's about, going to be 6 a.m. finally. And for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, I recommend that you do. I got a call, a very frantic call at 4 o'clock in the morning from a husband whose wife is now dying of liver failure on a ventilator in an ICU because she was trying to prove that Tylenol doesn't cause autism because of what Trump said on the news. Mind you, that's a Harvard study. Now, whether or not you believe the Harvard study or not is not not the issue here. The issue is that she's somewhere between 23 to 25 weeks and she overdosed on Tylenol and she's going to die. She's not going to come off that ventilator. And the guy got my phone number from somebody gave it to him. I mean, guys, it's early in the morning. I'm still in Hello Kitty sweatpants in my gym trying to work out. And she's going to die. It's going to be, let me tell you something about Tylenol overdosing and death, is that if you aren't administered the antidote, it is a very slow and painful death, okay? Because Tylenol, as well as Benadryl and aspirin, are the 3 most common OTCs that people will typically try to unalive themselves with, so I don't get censored. But now people are just taking massive amounts of Tylenol to prove Trump wrong. I mean, weren't these the same people who put Harvard and Fauci and the pillars of science on a pedestal? And now they refuse to believe it. Like, I don't believe it either. But I'm also not going to go overdose on Tylenol either. And it's just so sad because he has to make the choice of them going and trying to emergency deliver this baby, and the baby may not survive. Baby's going to spend a long time in the NICU. Hopefully the baby will survive. And remember, guys, preemies have complications even if they do survive. I didn't ask him if he had more children. So, I mean, let's say this woman they have more children. They lost their mother. Baby's not going to grow up with the mom. He lost his whole life if this baby dies too.
This goes on. The point of it is not that this woman is going to pass away or whether Tylenol is part of an autism or not, but it's really terrifying to me, Eric, that people hate Donald Trump so much that they literally took an over-the-counter drug in massive quantity in order to prove him wrong. And now they're going into liver failure. I mean, I saw dozens and dozens of pregnant women on TikTok taking handfuls of Tylenol and saying, screw you, Donald Trump. You don't know anything about medicine. You're not a doctor. He's listening to top scientists. Your thoughts on this rebellion that's costing someone their life?
So first off, my thoughts and prayers go to the family of, like, the woman is dying. That sounds like a tragedy. It sounds like potentially also the loss of a 22-year-old child in the womb, or like significant medical complications that follow that. That 22 weeks. Yeah, 22 weeks. That's terrible. And that's an innocent life. I think whatever the negative health impacts Tylenol may have, far more dangerous medical conditions that I think that video clip underlines. Number one is Trump derangement syndrome, which is what's causing these women to want to do that. Like, that's insane. Owning the conservatives or owning Trump by poisoning your own body. By the way, just as an aside, women tend to succeed less in unaliving themselves than men, because men tend to use weapons and women use over-the-counter medication, and they get the dosage is wrong. Which is exactly what's happened in this instance. But Trump derangement syndrome is bad, but even worse, man. I think, and I know we will talk about some things related to the Charlie Kirk situation later, but this culture that we have so many people who are chronically online, and the negative impact that has, because if you have Trump derangement syndrome, you have to have this feedback of constant reinforcement. You need to be in a community of people watching your TikTok videos, and you need to be constantly getting that dopamine hit of like, yes, this is exactly the right thing to be. And aren't we so glad that we're all kind of in this together? You saw that in COVID, it happened, and it's led to other, I think, significant mental illness increases. So, like, that's terrible. And you're exactly right, because whatever Trump says he's in favor of, then you see the left come out. I mean, that's why the left, the party of Believe Women and Me Too, celebrates the illegal immigrant domestic abuser, Kilmar Garcia, because Trump said, hey, we need to send him out of here. Like, that is exactly how backwards and broken and how willing to twist themselves and all kinds of mental and emotional contortions the left is to be in opposition of anything Donald Trump says he's in favor of, even if it's something the left previously said they were in favor of, like Harvard.
Yeah. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but I just think it's really important because according to YouTube, 7 million unique people watch me every 30 days. And so I just want people to know, like, Tylenol can help you as an adult. If you have glutathione, your body can clear that. If you're a baby, it can't. Some adults can't even, but who cares what President Trump had to say? Yeah, he's listening to scientists, right? He's the president of the United States. So let's just see, according to Autism Capital, what Tylenol has had to say. 2019, congrats on your upcoming edition. So exciting. It'd be great to touch base real quick since we haven't tested Tylenol to be used during pregnancy. Here's another one, 2017. We actually don't recommend using any of our products while pregnant. Thank you for taking time to voice your concern. Another 2017. Thank you for the shout out, Carrie. Just make sure you talk to your doctor before taking Tylenol while you're pregnant. Thanks again. And 2016. If you are pregnant or nursing, seek the advice of your healthcare professional before using Tylenol or any medication. And then now we have also this, Johns Hopkins University, taking Tylenol during pregnancy associated with elevated risk for autism and ADHD. So, like, this is 2019. This is not Donald Trump. This is news that is not being put out there by the medical community. Why? Because there's billions of dollars on the line. So I just wanted my audience to know there is this rebellion against Donald Trump that's killing people, but also you guys are smart. Be careful with Tylenol. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and I wish I had the stats, but we did a podcast on something related to this, and it's something like 70% of the advertisers on primetime cable news shows are pharmaceutical companies. And of course, it's not just the advertising, but you've got these corporate conglomerates that are invested in or often affiliated with the actual pharmaceutical companies themselves as well. So I mean, the reality is, the FDA, many people are very critical of them for being bought and paid for by these same interests. The conversation that RFK is starting with, like the red dyes and these petrochemicals that find their way into the foods in this country, even though they're not in the foods in other countries, it just shows you that the food companies and the drug companies have their way and sway in a much more aggressive and I think detrimental way in this country than they do elsewhere. And that's why I welcome an announcement like this, because I think, yes, it's important that we're honest about these things, but I think it's more important that we just have a separation of influence and message. And that's what I hope we see continue.
Yeah. I'm kind of a bottom of the barrel influencer, but even Pfizer offered me $30,000 to tell people to get the COVID shot. Now it's coming out that Travis Kelce of the Chiefs NFL football team, I remember seeing the ad. I got my flu shot and my COVID. I'm feeling great, right? He was offered probably between $6 to $20 million for that. It is illegal to use celebrity endorsements for a drug. So now he's probably going to be investigated. Let me move on from this to the next story.
Well, hang on now. Let me just push back real fast, because I was going to push back on your bottom of the barrel influencer thing after your 7 million unique views over 30 days. But when you compare your pay scale to Travis Kelce, I agree with you. Bottom of the barrel, man. Like 30K bottom versus 6 to 20 million. No, I agree. Yeah. Okay.
And let me tell you, think of how much stuff I could have bought with 30 grand, but I couldn't sell my integrity. So I just told them, pound sand and never contact me again.
And by the way, and that's another thing we talked about being chronically online, and it's been true, at least with television programs that are on, network or cable news, you can see the advertisements then come on. So you're aware of the companies and the commercial interests that are invested in those programs. You've seen how many stories now about George Soros linked networks paying for these leftist influencers. And that's a dangerous thing, or at least that's a thing we have yet to truly account for in this online media consumption space. Is you're not necessarily going to see those traditional advertisements. Yeah, like Pfizer could have paid you 30 grand and you would not have disclosed it. Travis Kelce did not disclose it. And so, so people are being manipulated in ways that they're unaware of. And that's actually more dangerous, I think, than just a straight advertising model.
Yeah. Remember, you'd win the Super Bowl and you'd say, oh, what are you going to do? How are you going to celebrate this? I'm going to Disneyland, right? And then you'd get a $50,000 bonus from Disney. Now people, I'm getting the COVID shot. I'm just kidding. No, nobody's doing that. So
I'm getting a booster.
I'm getting that 7th booster. Cryptocurrency is on fire, and here's huge news. Trump media just signed a massive $6.4 billion deal with Yorkville Acquisition Corp and Crypto.com. the crypto platform trusted by millions of users worldwide. They're teaming up to acquire up to $6.4 billion in CRO to establish America's first CRO treasury, Trump Media Group CRO strategy. Once complete, this new company will be the largest publicly traded CRO holder out there. Ready to join the crypto revolution? Head to crypto.com today and be part of this historic move. That's crypto.com. Don't wait. For more information on the proposed business combination, check out Yorkville Acquisition Corp's public filing. It's come out in the wake of this Charlie Kirk tragedy that Jezebel News was actually hiring people to put hexes or curses. They were literally seeking out people in the Wiccan community, witchcraft community, to do curses on Charlie Kirk a couple of weeks before his passing. Megyn Kelly covered this. This is a 7-minute video. We're only going to watch 2 minutes of it, but I found this interesting and disgusting.
And while their article about all of this hit, it was published on Monday, September 8th, it makes clear that the writer contracted for the curse in late August. She says she wanted it to line up with the new moon in Virgo, which this year meant August 23rd. That tracks because she points out in the piece that by August 24th, she was waiting impatiently for results. The witch, they reveal, promised on August 23rd that, quote, you will see the first results within 2 to 3 weeks. This was 18 days before Charlie was killed. Not satisfied with this curse, the amped up one alone, Jezebel reached out to a, quote, third witch, Priestess Lilin. Jezebel opined, if enough people cursed a single person, would the results be stronger? Quote, when I asked her if she'd noticed more political figures being targeted these days, she said yes. The next day, Lilin sent the Jezebel writer proof of the hex she had cast, quote, a photograph in flames, the edges slowly curling inward, engulfing Charlie's ridiculous, scrunched up little face. She whispered, I imagine, writes the Jezebel reporter, trust the unseen. Chills, writes Jezebel. Sunday, August 24th passed, writes the author, and nothing. Monday, August 25th, still nothing. Tuesday, August 26th, nothing. But then she writes, she reminded herself, this is witchcraft, not Amazon. The forces operate on their own schedule. The Jezebel writer ends the piece as follows. So, did my Etsy curses work? Time will tell.
All right. What the heck is a news organization doing, hiring people to do curses on political? I find it to be so weird. Like, I lived in the Dominican Republic, where they're kind of known for like black magic and curses and hexes and different things. And there was creepy feelings sometimes, but I don't know. I just like, can you imagine if like CNN or Daily Mail or Fox News, if it came out that they were doing your thoughts on them literally hiring 2 or 3 witches to put a curse on Charlie Kirk just 18 days before he dies?
No, it's so gross. You know, you say you lived in the Dominican Republic. I've traveled to Haiti a few times, and done some missionary work down there. And if you go down there, then you're very aware of the very dark and spiritual kind of elements that exist in the voodoo culture and everything else. And so that's something that a lot of people believe in. And if you talk to people who are trying to work in, let's call it the light of spiritual awakening, then they would say there's a very dark force you have to deal with and confront on a regular basis. It's disgusting. I can't believe someone would brag about it. I mean, just that. Imagine a world where people say, no, I am asking for someone who's engaged in having conversations with people around this country on a variety of issues and just trying to engage in this historic and I think welcome American tradition of dialogue and like exchange of ideas, and that are, because we don't like some of the words that those people say, that we think it's then okay to like pay for harm to come upon that person, regardless of what form of harm that is. Remember, we all thought it was ridiculous when the New York Times had people in the editorial section, like they're leaving because your words are violence and your words make me feel unsafe. And I think it just, on the one hand, it's just an idea, but it just shows you that's how dangerous some of those ideas become. Because if you think someone's words are violence, then it justifies violence or harm being done upon them for their words. And we've now seen firsthand just how dangerous that retribution can be because of someone's words. That's insane. I hate that story. And I think Jezebel News should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very strange. President Trump has labeled Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. They are opening investigations into George Soros and others, how taxpayer money was flowed through NGOs, fake charities, fake organizations in order to destroy the United States of America. You and your organization, you guys study George Soros and these networks, these octopus networks that have so many different hands in doing evil and undermining America. Your thoughts on the announcement of going after Antifa and those that fund Antifa?
Well, I will say this: when he said that they are considering RICO charges against George Soros, on the one hand, it seems some people would say, well, that's a classic, like Trump. It's aggressive. It's an overreach. But then you have to remember, number one, Donald Trump has been charged with RICO in the state of Georgia for his efforts to push back against the results of the 2020 election. So it's a statute that he's well acquainted with. And number two, the state of Georgia themselves have actually used RICO to bring charges against an entity who is affiliated with groups that have received actual money from George Soros funded groups. So it's not a stretch. I mean, there's a group called Cop City. There's a group that like waged violence, actually shot a police officer in connection to these protests regarding this development. It's like a training center for police in the state of Georgia. They call it Cop City, and they end up like causing all kinds of property destruction and everything else. So, it's an interesting legal theory. But I will say the Trump organization, you're seeing stories now that they're not messing around, right? Like it's in the news today that Jim Comey may be indicted for potentially lying to Congress in the aftermath of the cover up of Hillary Clinton and the fake Russiagate dossier and everything else. So they clearly are saying, look, they understand. And Steve and I know you pay a lot of attention. You have 7 million unique people that see you in 30 days. And I've seen some of the comments on some of your videos. And one of the dominant comments is like, look, that's outrageous. It's wrong. But what's anybody going to do about it? And I think the Trump administration is saying, listen, we hear you and we're going to see what we can, in fact, do about it. Harmeet Dillon, who's deputy or assistant attorney general in the Civil Rights Division, used a phrase I thought was really interesting. She said, we're in the Department of Justice. That doesn't mean we're in the Department of Convictions, but it is our job to refer people for prosecution. And then we will let the justice system play out. But if there is evidence of people committing a crime, then that is worth being investigated. And it's worth potentially a grand jury weighing the evidence and deciding if criminal charges are warranted. And that is a charge the Department of Justice takes very seriously. And so I think like these sacred cows of the left that were protected for years under Joe Biden, despite a number of pieces of evidence that potential crimes were committed. I mean, remember, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, these are people who have gone to prison for just refusing to testify to Congress. So, the one party, Joe Biden, called for Donald Trump to be prosecuted and then celebrated the prosecutor, Fani Willis, Georgia. She walked the red carpet at a White House Correspondents' event for bringing charges against Donald Trump. One party has clearly made a habit of prosecuting political opponents, and it's not the Republicans. So I think, once again, just like RFK and Tylenol, beginning to have a conversation about like, did you guys commit crimes? And if so, we actually might do something about it is so different. And I think it's a welcome change in terms of just like, let's have some actual equal justice. And let's just show there are consequences for actions.
Okay. I mean, I genuinely believe everybody deserves their day in court. Everybody deserves an advocate and somebody that is trying to help plead their case. I believe in that. At the same time, as you mentioned, like they've had the privilege of operating in the dark and having the cover of one party that doesn't mind if somebody picks up the gun or the match and goes and does the actual violence and destruction. So they say words are violence, but they use these words until somebody that votes for them actually takes action. And that's what we saw with the Summer of Love. That's what we've been seeing lately with these horrific shootings. I think, maybe there's nothing there, but George Soros, he's got the money and the lawyers to defend him if he is innocent.
Well, absolutely. And just to be clear, like no one's going to charge Antifa or any of the groups that have funded Antifa related groups unless they've actually committed crimes. That's the point. I mean, the point of the RICO statute is you're not just going to charge with somebody for doing something that you disagree with ideologically. It's for having participated in a conspiracy that you could reasonably assumed have led to a crime. But I think it's real. The language does matter, and it's not about Antifa. But just listen to this, Stephen, just because I think it's important to understand the frame of how some of these issues get discussed. This is an article from the Washington Post about the pending indictment on Jim Comey. And it just says the Justice Department is preparing to seek an indictment against FBI Director Jim Comey for allegedly giving false testimony to Congress about his role in investigating these efforts to influence the 2016 election. The effort, which was in the planning stage Wednesday evening, comes days after President Donald Trump demanded prosecutors use the criminal justice system to punish his political opponents. Now, I don't remember Donald Trump saying, I demand you punish my political opponents. I remember Donald Trump saying, hey, listen, if these people have broken the law, as there's mounting evidence that they have, right? Letitia James, Adam Schiff have committed mortgage fraud, and that's clear. Then how come if regular people who voted for us, by the way, the Republicans, if they would face legal repercussions for having violated the law, why wouldn't we then hold the people who actually help write and enforce laws to the same standard? So I don't think Donald Trump has called for his political opponents to be persecuted. I think he's called for people who have violated the law and who've been given a free pass under the Biden-Obama years to also be held to the same standard. But I think the language in the Washington Post is interesting and telling.
Yeah, no, that is. They've got it's just justification. Like, oh, it must be political revenge. And a good example of that is Letitia James was out speaking. Gosh, I can't remember who it was. It's another podcaster on the left. And basically her message was that this is revenge from Donald Trump. And he's using mortgage fraud, which is something that's pretty common, to go after his enemies, right? So like she tries to justify, she doesn't say she's guilty, but it's something that's common that he's now using as the weapon to go after his enemies. So I'm also hearing that her name is coming up. And I know that there have been grand juries in Virginia as well as, I believe, New York. We may be hearing something about that. But according to Alex Jones, MSNBC, we could be seeing this James Comey any day now.
Yeah, well, just on the Letitia James thing, it reminds me of a bad Scooby-Doo episode where they pulled the mask off at the end. And she's like, and I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that second primary residence loan, Because I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Primary means one, Adam Schiff, Letitia James. So if you're doing a second one, then that is not okay. And, that's like you and I wouldn't be able to get away with that. Yeah, the Jim Comey stuff is interesting. We'll see. Again, then there's been reporting about that they didn't want to do it. I guess one of the assistant U.S. attorneys who was interim resigned just to put somebody else in place there. But if you're lying to Congress, I mean, Jim Comey said that he did not ask for anything to be leaked to the media. That was directly contrasted with, or like you have evidence from Andrew McCabe who said the opposite. So, I mean, I think that's among the pieces of evidence, and we'll see, right? A grand jury will look at it, and if they decide there's enough evidence to indict, then that will happen. And that, that would be, I think, the highest ranking official to face criminal justice repercussions. But I still don't see this as Donald Trump going after political opponents. I think Donald Trump is looking for people on the right widely believe have been nefariously involved in things. I mean, Donald Trump faced how many felony counts for just contesting the 2020 election results? So if you have evidence that someone actively participated in a cover-up that would have potentially swayed the results of 2016 election, I'm not saying it invites an indictment, but I think it invites scrutiny.
Yeah. And I think that's where they should start, and then let the evidence trail lead where it may. And if they end up in jail, great. And if not, then I don't want an innocent person going to jail either. Well, Eric, this has been a great conversation. Tell my audience about your show and how they can follow you online.
Yeah, I will. I have one more question for you, Stephen, or I have one question. Yeah, but we do a podcast called The Drill Down. You can find it at thedrilldown.com. You can find me on Twitter at Eric_Eggers. And it's always so great to talk with you. And I always enjoy, meeting so many of your viewers on social media in the aftermath of your videos, which are obviously very popular. I did want to ask you, because I've done your show now a few times, and I know you live in the state of Utah, and I know you've covered the Charlie Kirk thing quite extensively. And so I think you've been great on this, but I just was curious as I think someone who considers you a friend now, like as a Utah resident, just like how has it been? I mean, how has it been in Utah to find that this is someone who came from Utah? Just Utah was in my mind the last place I would have expected something like this to happen. So I just wondering kind of like how you are experiencing that and how your community is experiencing that.
Yeah, good question. I think Utah is extremely embarrassed that such a high, such a well-known, well-respected person like Charlie Kirk could be killed in our state was a major embarrassment. For me, I've been on such a roller coaster. I was one of the first people to break the news that he had been killed because I had a niece that was there, and she sent a text to the family, Charlie Kirk's been shot in the neck. And I was like, no, I went to his Twitter feed. I'm like, he's handing out hats. Well, then all of a sudden it started breaking. So here I am, I go live, even though I don't want to, but my audience looks to me for news and truth. And I'm literally trying not to throw up while I'm broadcasting this. And then a few days go by, and then I start realizing like, oh, wait a minute. I have a lot in common with the killer, and I have a lot in common with Charlie Kirk. I'm this white male Christian. I'm in Utah, a Mormon upbringing. So like, here I am going, wait a minute, could I be evil or am I good? Like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? So a lot of questions. At the end of the day, I really like Charlie Kirk. I got to interview him twice. The only political event I've ever been to was with Charlie Kirk's group, Turning Point USA. And so lot of emotions. And then like 5 days later, I didn't have anything going on. I was making like 3 videos a day, interviewing experts. And then I had some like downtime, and I just got like really sick. My chest got really heavy. And I just remember like all of a sudden it really like sunk in, like this horrific thing happened. Like I watched somebody die 25 times in order to bring information to my audience. And I think it started to play with my head. And then we had the memorial, and it was like a rebirth. I got washed, and I just remembered like, okay, I have these religious beliefs that tell me that there is life after this, that the purpose of this life is to gain experience that you can't any other way. And part of experience is good and evil. And unfortunately, evil won here, but I don't believe evil wins in the end. So I appreciate you checking in on me. But yeah, it's been a wild couple weeks.
Yeah, ironically, my I've been to St. George, Utah. My grandmother used to say that St. George, was one of her favorite towns in the country, and I think it's a wonderful place and it's got wonderful people. And I know that that's not who St. George is. I know it's not who Utah is, and I know it's not who we are as a country. And I think that's like the lesson to take away from that is that we have to remember who we are, and restate that and tell our story as a country that we are people who can disagree, but we're not going to do it that way. And I think I think your program is never been more valuable to like the conversation we need to have as a country, because you always keep it, I think, informative and true, but fair. And I think those are among the values that we need to remember that we stand for as a people. So thank you for having me on. Thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that has gone through my mind the most was here was a young man that didn't have the courage to pick up a microphone, but had the courage to pick up a Mauser rifle. And if you're not willing to talk to somebody, you certainly shouldn't be willing to shoot them. Maybe just go on with your life if you don't have the courage to use your voice. So very, very, very sad. Well, Eric, I'm going to put some direct links down below so that people can find your show. Thanks for coming on. The Tylenol thing, so crazy to me. Like, anyone should be careful with any drug that they take, but to do it just to spite Donald Trump seems like such a waste of time and energy. But what do I know?
Like, hey, I'm old enough to remember what a good old fashioned yard sign was a form of protest. Let's go back to that. Like, how about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to see you.